Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Sibos 2021, What We Learned. This is the official Sibos conference wrap show where we look back over an incredible week of insight, intelligence, and debate. My name is Julia Streets. I'm the founder and the CEO of Streets Consulting and a financial services broadcaster. And in this show, I'll be summarizing, reflecting, reminding, and revisiting some of the many, many highlights of the week. And what a week it was. Let me just bring that into sharp relief. 19,000, yes, 19,000 delegates tuned in from nearly every single country in the world. 4 days of jam-packed content, all digitally delivered. And since the very first Sibos back in 1978, every single year, banking and financial services professionals from around the world congregate at Sibos, keen to listen, to learn, to be challenged, and as a forum to shape visions, pathways, and plans. And this year, all the discussions centered around the conference theme, recharging global finance. Throughout the week, we heard from 94 presidents, chairs, CEOs, C-level executives, some of the biggest and some of the most innovative companies in finance, each tackling the important issues that face the industry today. Issues that combine and ally around four key themes: digital acceleration, managing risk, transformative technology, and banking on change. So let's take a moment to reflect on some of those key highlights at Sibos 2021.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sibos.
In the face of adversity, you can get things done that sometimes you think you can't get done in normal market circumstances.
What does theoretical physics have to say about money?
So here we are at our second digital edition of Sibos. It has actually really impressed me how the industry as a whole has not only maintained business as usual, but has also got great momentum on its own transformation. And if anything, with a much bigger sense of purpose and responsibility.
Those financial institutions that will survive are those that adapt most quickly.
It is even more important that the social purpose of an organization is crystal clear and well articulated in order to get you through difficult situations.
That's why we must relentlessly modernise our regulated financial system through public-private partnerships and through communities that bring our industry together, such as SWIFT.
They must display the same confidence, security, resilience. So that's absolutely non-negotiable for us.
Well, one of the risks is definitely cyber. If we have more things online, if more things are digital, and if somebody's able to break through.
Biodiversity is even more difficult than climate.
Sustainability is not just an idea.
How do we steer our customers to borrow in order to make themselves greener?
In my experience with climate and anything related, candidly, to engineering, when China says it's going to do something, it has mapped out how it's going to do it and intends to execute it.
Let us take this conference as an opportunity to move forward, to forge a brighter future, recharge finance with technology, and jointly promote the recovery of the global economy.
We are optimistic that in 2022 we will come together again in a physical Sibos in Amsterdam.
It's so impressive. So behind the scenes, the Sibos team, they start planning years in advance in many cases. They're all consulting with the SWIFT community of members, with their partners, with sponsors, analysts, and also the media, keen to find out what will be compelling content that will really, really matter. And this year was no exception. And I've mentioned the senior speakers, but it certainly doesn't end there. You may not know that Sibos 2021 played host to more than 150 individual conference sessions where more than 250 industry experts and innovators debated how to recharge global finance. Now, these sessions really challenged our thinking. They got us to think about the future of financial services. They got us to think about how to push ourselves further than just our daily domains. So we talked about climate change. We talked about geopolitical events And we talked about international trade and what must we all do in order to play our part in driving the changes behind these global dynamics. What must we as an industry do in response? And particularly when we think about that all-important conversation about climate change. And I reflect very keenly on the closing remarks of Mark Carney. You'll know he was the former governor of the Bank of England, he was the former governor of the Bank of Canada, and he was the former chair of the Financial Stability Board. And today, he is the UN Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance. And his remarks all focused on how to harness the collective power of the financial services industry to tackle climate change. And if you missed it, you can go to sibos.com because all of his remarks, as indeed much of the content, is all available there. Now, I mentioned about the 4 key themes: digital acceleration, managing risk, transformative technology, and banking on change. But there was also another dimension to the Sibos content this year, because throughout the conference, delegates could follow what were known as the Sibos Red Threads. This concept was designed to take us all on a journey across the 4 days, and it's about facilitating learning, understanding, and also informing our decision-making. So the red threads for Sibos this year were focused in 4 key areas. The first around digital assets. Think crypto digital currencies. Think about central bank digital currencies. That was the first one. The second red thread focused on trust and identity. Incredibly important right the way across the 4 days of the conference. The third looked at AI, machine learning, quantum computing, robotics, but also the role of humans in that engagement. And the fourth red thread focused on sustainable finance. Now, many friends of Sibos will also know that there are different streams. So think about the innovation point of view by tuning in to Inner Tribe, always popular. Then, of course, there was the Spotlight program. Think of it as in, short form TEDx spotlight sessions. And then there was also the Sibos Academy, which brought in the academic point of view. But I'll be going into some of these a little bit later on in the show as well. And one of the great joys of Sibos is that we welcome delegates from all over the world and from many, many different areas of financial services, whether that's transaction management, trade finance, treasury, or security standards, cyber security, and the worlds of retail, wholesale, capital markets, payments, and from every corner of the globe. Everybody comes keen to learn and everybody leaves wanting to know more. And we know that because you tell us that. So what we'd encourage you to do is that when we see feedback forms, when you see them land in your inbox or any sort of approach by the Sibos team, please do give us your feedback. It's incredibly important. Tell us what you're keen to see in the 2022 program. So with all of this in mind, the big challenge, of course, is how on earth do you summarize an entire conference in one show? And the answer simply is not alone. So I brought in a number of experts. There are 4 experts who are going to be coming in, giving us their key takeaways, thinking about some of those red threads of the conference themes as well. And they're going to be joining me shortly. But just before we do, I just want to take a moment to flag some of the amazing content. It's a huge bank of material that's available from the conference. And when I say that, what I mean is, more than 70 articles, interviews, and blogs, and a whole host of on-demand session recordings are available behind the sibos.com login. So if you are a registered delegate, you'll be delighted to know that all of this content is available until the end of the year, the end of December 2021. And if you're watching this and you're not a registered delegate, you could still register. Registrations are open between now and the end of October 2021. So therefore you can sign up to sibos.com and access this incredible content, all the recordings. And by the way, do spread the word to your colleagues and your contacts as well, because it is an incredible bank of resource material for everybody. And you can also sign up for the Sibos newsletters, Sibos Insider, for all the latest updates. It's a great way of staying abreast of all the new information that's coming out from the Sibos team, and particularly the Sibos wrap-up edition, where this video is also being featured. Now, if like me, you're a bit more of a social animal, do check out some of the social media platforms as well, because they have been active, to say the least. Take Twitter alone. In Twitter, the number of impressions spiked. And when I say spiked, I mean 940% increase during Sibos week as well. And the beat goes on. So do continue to follow, to share, to like, to comment, and let's keep that momentum going as well. And it also pushes it out to the world and keeps that content available for everyone. So now let's move from posts to pundits. And it gives me great pleasure to now introduce our amazing experts, 4 Sibos experts who are going to be joining me each in turn to give us their highlights from the conference. Martin Burr, Alenka Grealish, Vinod Jain, and Mark Watson. And I'll be speaking to each of them one by one as we pick up on some of those big issue debates and asking them for their key takeaways, thinking about the discussion through some of those red threads that I talked about. And I'll be guiding them all straight the way through it. So let's get straight into it. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our first expert today. She's a senior analyst at Celent. Please welcome Alenka Grealish.
Thanks, Julia. It's great to be here with you. And that was a mouthful. So I'll try my best to consolidate. I'd say first takeaway is that increasingly FIs recognize that banking and payment systems have not kept up with the pace of advancements in the digital economy and in trading. E-com operates 24/7 cross-border relatively inexpensively. Trading, the front office is automated, there's low latency. Then you switch gears, banks operate still typically in terms of batch processing, store and forward, and payments, messaging, clearing, and settlement are often decoupled and can take days. This dichotomy is just unsustainable. And in response, we're seeing and hearing at Sibos how a number of FIs and FI-backed consortiums are harnessing blockchain, smart contracts, digital assets to align the performance of banking and payment systems with those of the digital economy. The second takeaway, I'd say, is that the Internet of Value is beginning to crystallize. And let me start with a framework. Let's think of the old industrial flywheels that take a lot of energy to make a half turn and a full turn. But once they start turning, there's momentum and it's hard to stop them. So let's overlay adoption of blockchain and digital assets. They've proven value. So part of the first turn, feasibility, certainly. And now we're seeing these use cases get into the bottom of that first turn, economic viability. And there's some exciting initiatives we heard about at Sibos around interbank payments, delivery versus payments, for example, correspondent banking, messaging, cross-border, interbank, intrabank, intra-company, and importantly, when we get to the ESG, the S part, remittances. So lots of interesting energy there. And we're seeing cryptocurrencies like XRP, Stellar Lumens, and stablecoins like USDC playing an important role in getting that wheel to turn and deliver the Internet of Value. Also, the introduction of central bank digital currencies will accelerate the mainstreaming of digital assets. I'd say my third, coming to the crown jewel here, cryptocurrencies are gaining legitimacy as a new asset class. When the Bitcoin paper first came out, it was going to be the missing link, the Internet of Value, a medium of exchange. But as we know, Bitcoin failed as a medium of exchange for legal activities. Then the pivot was to blockchain, distributed ledger technology as the new disruptor. Now we're seeing Bitcoin as in the lead as a new digital asset class, which has profound implications. It's been initially driven by retail investors. Now we're seeing institutional investors enter the game. And with institutional investors, you get more sophisticated demand. And that certainly is going to accelerate developments in decentralized finance.
That's a wonderfully succinct summary of such a broad topic as well. Thank you, Alenka. And I'm really intrigued to know, is there anything that particularly surprised you?
Oh, there's always things that surprise me. I think I was pleasantly surprised at the pace at which banks are opening up to being disruptors instead of being disrupted. They're recognizing they need to disrupt themselves and they need to collaborate. So an interesting new mix, alchemy between disruption and collaboration. I'm hearing FIs speak of disruption in terms of moving from incremental change. Oh, we've added a new feature to our corporate portal, to what I'd call long game investment in new technology like blockchain and digital assets. They're moving away from entrenched processes and beliefs, which always deter change. And I'm hearing executives commit, even though they might not be fully convinced. So it's commit and observe as opposed to just shut down disruption, innovation. And that's a profound change. Mm-hmm. I'd also say that FIs are increasingly recognizing that the importance of collaboration. And I think I saw that a few years ago start to manifest at Sibos. And now it's full blown internal collaboration, front, middle, back office, bringing risk and compliance to the table early in development as opposed to later downstream. External collaboration between other banks and fintechs to build next generation infrastructure, blockchain platforms, and then they can compete on the overlay services, but build the backbone together. And you can't disrupt without regulators. So increasingly we're seeing partnerships with regulators to develop guardrails up front so that banks know how they can play in a new disruptive world.
So Alenka, I'm going to set you a challenge. You've got 30 seconds to tell us what we should look forward to next year.
Oh, goodness, 30 seconds. Okay. The importance of regulatory clarity. It is paramount for the future of blockchain and digital assets to get regulatory clarity. Right now, crypto economy skyrocketing outside of regulatory boundaries, and it behooves the fintechs, the developers, the banks to work closely with regulators. I think central bank digital currencies will be a positive for innovation because with knowledge comes better regulation. And it's also bringing public sector and private sector together to build new platforms. Second, the scaling of blockchain and digital assets is paramount. Getting back to that flywheel, you've got to get it spinning through economic viability. So we need more developers, banks, and end users using platforms for them to become economically sustainable. Mm-hmm. Did I make it?
I was going to say, you've done it remarkably well, really. Just in 30 seconds, I might have slightly gone over, but listen, I really appreciate all your thoughts on that. It's a tough job trying to summarize all of that. Thank you so much. Alenka Grealish, Senior Analyst at Celent, thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to hearing from other experts shortly. Thank you. So Inner Tribe is always a really popular stream in the Sibos program, and this year was stocked high with speakers and showcases and discussions about the very latest of innovations. Ever popular is the perfect pitch competition. We had 6 finalists vying for everybody's votes, and congratulations to the winners to Quantexa and Partner Hub ZRT. Many congratulations to them. Now, if you've been scrolling through the agenda, of course, you would have come across the Sibos Academy. And that's where the Swift Institute team called upon their extensive network of professors and academics to share their research findings, and also to present some of their hypotheses centered around the key Sibos themes and threads as well. And now, as every enlightened leader will know, and believe me, there is research that will back this up. You just have to ask the Swift Institute, because diversity, equity, and inclusion altogether bring better commercial outcomes. So this year, for the 3rd year running, Sibos welcomed and showcased its Sibos Stars. And in case you were wondering what STARS stands for, it's the Sibos Talent Accelerator Route Scholarship. It is a cohort of 25 rising female executives, our leaders of tomorrow, and the Sibos Stars program mentors them through a wide range of activities, and they call upon the Sibos community to support these extraordinary women as they accelerate throughout their careers. So it was wonderful to see them again. Now, listen, let's take a moment, if I would, to bring in our second expert. He's the Director of Regulatory Affairs at the Institute of International Finance, and also known as the IIF. And it gives me a great pleasure to welcome Martin Burr. Martin, great to have you on the show. Thanks for being with us. And I'd like to ask you, if you would, to reflect on one of the think tanks that was brought to light this year. And the Institute of International Finance collaborated with EY to talk about one of those key themes, which was all about banking on change. Now, I mentioned the threads. The red thread I would love you to focus on is trust and identity, as we ask you, please, for your 3 key takeaways.
Great. Thank you so much, Julia. Sibos 2021 was once again a great conference. I enjoyed hosting the deep dive with Mark Watson of EY and discussing the findings of our CRO risk survey together. As I look across the whole Sibos conference, I guess the 3 takeaways I would see would be the acceleration of technology in the payment space, hearing increased concerns about cyber risk, and then the new and increased focus by policymakers on non-financial risk. So just to unpack those 3, there's been a very large acceleration of digital trends that were already happening pre-COVID, but that due to the pandemic and due to us working from home have really expanded. And so we've seen a very quick integration and uptake of many new technologies, which allow us to work more effectively in financial services, to manage risks much better, to serve our clients, and to make our firms more resilient. So we see that with the cloud, obviously, which is being used all over now. We see it in AI. We saw it in the sessions on machine learning, robotics, quantum computing, and then also digital IDs and the role of the financial sector in building that trust and being that gateway between the consumers and the businesses. So I think that was a very important thing that I saw. So the second takeaway that I saw across the panels and the sessions was an increased concern about cybersecurity. So we're hearing from firms that the amount of cyber attacks is increasing, the scope and the sophistication. This is in part because many of us have been working remotely, and so it's increased the attack vector, and also for our customers, right? So there are more opportunities now for the adversaries to take advantage of this. And we've seen, especially in ransomware, as was mentioned, we've seen sessions on crypto. The ransomware attacks have really increased, and that is an element where we would need regulatory clarity. The third one would be the policymakers and their increasing regulatory and policy focus on non-financial risk. So we're seeing that the global standard bodies like the Financial Stability Board, but also the regional and domestic bodies are increasingly worried about how all these new technologies are impacting financial stability and risk in the financial sector. And we see that with operational resilience and cyber risk, and the conversations about what is the role of third parties or outsourcing or supply chains. And especially cloud computing has become a big issue where the policymakers want to make sure that everything there goes soundly. So I think that those would be sort of the 3 main takeaways I saw, Julia.
Mm-hmm. And as you observed those 3 things, was there anything that particularly sort of shocked you or surprised you?
I think what surprised me as we're all coming back at various speeds from the pandemic is the resilience and robustness of the financial sector. So despite this horrible pandemic, which has impacted health and economics, supply chain concerns, and everyone working remotely, we're seeing this very rapid digital transformation taking place in payments and across the financial system. People are still innovating. We're hearing about lots of new initiatives. And from a regulator's perspective, we've also seen that the payment system and the financial sector more broadly have been resilient. They've continued to function, and there have been no major issues or outages across the sector.
Martin, I'm really keen to, there's so much of what you were talking about in terms of the resilience of the industry and as we sort of continue to innovate as well. So go on, give us your thoughts about what we should be talking about next year.
Next year, well, I think there is definitely an increasing focus by regulators and supervisors on broadening their scope on third parties and on supply chains. So I think that's going to impact all of us, and it's important that we engage the authorities, explain our positions, explain the way that we see it. We also need to ensure there is a same risks, same rules approach so that regulated firms can compete on a level playing field with new entrants. And finally, I would advocate that next year we also ask for consistency in terms of rules and regulations around jurisdictions. The financial system is global, and many of the emerging issues that we are dealing with, including cyber, cloud, climate, it's important that approaches are coordinated and consistent around the globe.
So Martin Burr, Director of Regulatory Affairs of the Institute of International Finance, thank you so much for all your thoughts there and for being with us today. It's interesting, isn't it? The two kind of remarks about what we might expect next year, focused on regulation and considering policy and also collaboration as well. We're going to bring in our other two experts shortly, but in the meantime, I just want to just kind of change tack a little bit, which is, you know, increasingly when we talk to leaders in the industry, we know that physical and mental health really matter. And particularly when we're thinking about managing teams, this has been gaining importance over the last few years, particularly like never before. So this year, Sibos took this very seriously and they ran a daily health challenge session. And sponsored by our friends at NatWest, this session focused on exercises that were designed to enrich your body, your mind, and your soul. It even featured a poll that delegates could answer live or indeed later in the day throughout the conference. And we all recognize that within the concept of mental health, giving back is known to be incredibly important. So for Sibos, they rose to the challenge, as they always does. And for every response that was received in the poll, Sibos donated 30 minutes of teaching time to the conference charity, Teach for All. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Teach for All a bit later on. So I hope you got involved, and don't forget there's a whole host of information about mental health, physical health, how to look after your mind, your body, and your soul on sibos.com, because as we all know, it's incredibly important. So now let's move on to our third expert, and welcome to the show, the Managing Director of EY, Mark Watson. Mark, thank you so much for being with us as well. And I wondered if I could build on Martin's remarks as well, where we were talking about the theme of banking on change. But I'd like you to examine it, if you would, from a slightly different perspective, a different red thread, if you will, and that's the red thread of sustainable finance as well. I'm going to invite you now, if you would, to give us your 3 key takeaways.
Yeah, terrific. I mean, this has been a great conversation so far, and you're going to hear some things about regulation as I talk. But I think the 3 takeaways for me, one is sustainable finance is a huge opportunity for the industry. And I think that has been growing over the last couple of years. And we've recognized this could be a kind of a once in a many generation opportunity. You look at the bond market, you look at payments, you look at investing, there is just a wealth of opportunity to support customers, clients, communities. I think the exciting part is the industry is really recognizing its catalytic role. You don't get to a zero carbon economy without financial services. I think the Sibos conference, the second thing is that they really embedded it. I mean, you mentioned the STARS program. There was a lot about women-owned finance, minority-owned finance. Alenka talked about remittances. That's very much on the social side. At the top of the call, you mentioned Mark Carney, climate change. There were some things about sustainable reporting. So you really saw it kind of weaved into the whole of the Sibos agenda. But I think as much as the upside, we're also focused on the risks. There is a lot happening to understand how is climate change, social issues, and other ones really affecting industries, and how do you measure those risks? How do you manage them? So opportunities kind of broadly across all of the agenda, and really some of the risks that individual organizations are going to have to manage, and also systemically across the whole economy.
And it is fascinating to hear you talk about how all of this is weaved all the way through as well. And I wonder, it's a similar question to I've asked everybody else actually, which is, you know, in hearing that content, was there anything that particularly surprised you?
Well, I think the survey that Martin mentioned that we do with the IAF has been quite interesting. So we just launched our 11th survey. That's what we were really talking about. And one of the biggest findings was the 10th one that we did before COVID back in 2019. Climate change, as an example, really wasn't high on executive agendas. It wasn't high on board agendas. It's at the top of those agendas, particularly as an emerging risk, but even within the next 12 months. And we see that with our clients. It's gone from being, how financial services manage its own sustainability, its diversity, equity, inclusion programs, its sustainable programs, to really how can it help transform other organizations and help its customers and clients in that. So you've seen this just in 18 months shift from it being about us to being about them. And you can see that in the conference, but you can see that in all the conversations we're having out in the marketplace.
And I can't help but be intrigued as we begin to think through what 2022's discussion might be, given the acceleration of the importance of the discussion. What can you anticipate? What would you encourage us to be talking about next year?
Well, really around the opportunity. I mean, I certainly think that as you get up to the board level, they want to hear how are we really transforming economies? What is the commercial opportunity, financial opportunity, reputational opportunity? So that kind of strategic imperative, how are we embedding it in everything we do? Third parties, our suppliers, our people, everything we're doing, that is very much central to the strategy. So I think as we see that, I think it'll be interesting to see how the agenda keeps up. Certainly how you tell that story to all of your internal stakeholders and all your external stakeholders is going to be really important. Not that it's something done over here, but it's at the heart of financial services, which really gets to the point that Alenka and Martin made, and I foreshadowed. The regulators have a role here. We don't have standards around data, reporting, and a whole host of different things. And there needs to be some conformity, because it's really hard for financial services to manage multiple different regulations operating at different speed. So I think that's sort of going to be one of the main things. I do think, one last thought, Sibos is really around payments. And so, what sustainability and ESG means for payments versus retail banking, capital markets, I think it's going to be interesting to see where the innovations come.
And of course, that's a wonderful thing about Sibos. There'll be plenty of showcasing, plenty of discussion, and plenty of debate as well. So Mark Watson, Managing Director, EY, thank you so much for all your thoughts, for being with us today, and for sharing your reflections and expectations. Wonderful. Great. Thank you very much indeed. So as I mentioned, every year, Sibos supports a nominated charity, bringing the weight and also the energy of the conference to support their important work. And this year, the official Sibos charity was Teach for All. It's a partnership of 60 independent organizations that recruits and develops promising young leaders to teach in their nation's under-resourced schools and communities. And their work has a huge impact. It ensures children have the opportunity to truly fulfill their potential. Now, because of the support and the commitment of the Sibos team, we are so proud to announce that an impressive 2,000 hours of teaching time have been donated because of the conference. And I want to give a particular shout out, if I may, to our sponsors, Bank of America, CGI, and Intesa San Paulo, for their amazing contribution, their amazing support, because they doubled Sibos's contribution. Now, if you want to find out more, and I would really encourage you to do that, please do go to sibos.com/networking/Teach for All. Thank you to everybody who has supported Teach for All, and our support goes to everybody at the charity for their incredibly important work. So now I'm going to bring in our fourth expert, and he's been sitting quietly in the wings, ladies and gentlemen. He's a senior analyst at Aite-Novarica Group. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Vinod Jain. Vinod, wonderful you could be with us. Thank you so much. So similar to our other guest experts as well, I would love it if you could please focus on the topic of digital assets. And there's been some think tank exploration around this during the discussion. So I would love you to think about, what are the questions that we should pay attention to when we're addressing and adopting digital assets, but also through the lens of the red thread of artificial intelligence. So tell us about your key observations, your three key takeaways.
Sure. Thank you so much, Julia. I think the first one is, congratulations to the whole Sibos team, actually. Just to put this massive amount of this conference, if somebody would have to imagine to put 19,000 delegates, global participation, digital reach out to across the members of the financial community, that itself is fantastic. I think congratulations to the Sibos team actually on that. coming to those two topics, what you just mentioned, very interesting words as we see digital assets and artificial intelligence, but was able to find a clear definition of it, of both the topics. And I think because the perspective of the definition is differing from institutions to institutions, from providers to providers. And I think that's what I saw in this overall theme was there's no clear definitions, and there has to be a new perspective which needs to be brought up to really understand when somebody says digital assets, what is it you are referring to actually? And I think in our think tank decisions, we identified various operating models as part of our research, which highlights the complexity which would come up in moving the securities and the cash in the post-trade world, which would come up. And I think the way which we looked at it was, we identified three kinds of securities in it. We identified the traditional securities, the tokenized securities, and the securities which are native to a blockchain. And there are four kinds of currencies which needs to be exchanged: the traditional cash, the stable coins, the wholesale CDBC, and the cryptocurrencies. Now, if we put all these things three together, you get 12 different operating models which will be coming up. And I think the complexity of just one model itself, that the traditional cash and securities, which we have been living in for the past around like so many years, that would continue. And on top of it, we would have around 11 more models which will be coming up. And I think each of those models have to speak to one another. And I think that itself is the greater complexity which would come up for us in the post-trade world around it. And I think when I look at the post-trade world, we divide it into two worlds over here right now. So one is the existing world, which we would bring efficiency, make it cheaper, faster, and better. And the second world would be the one world of the digital assets, the tokenized assets, and the cryptocurrencies of it. Let me address the first part of it. The first one, which we said, is around the making the efficiency of cheaper, faster, and better. And I think that's where the real applications of AI would need to come in to really identify, because the main thing around the AI is we were able to understand the data, what we exist today. There's no use of putting an AI application to something new technologies which nobody understands it, or which we are trying to understand, I would say. So I think the application of AI in the current world is what we would see a maximum takeoff. And that's where the question would come up to say, go back to the basics to really identify whether we have the right data associated with it. If we have the right data, then yes, we would apply the AI tools on top of it. And I think that's where we would see the maximum AI aspects which we would come in. I think that's my take on the AI part of it.
And a wonderfully succinct summation of an incredibly complex and wide-reaching debate as well. I wonder, when you've been listening to people discuss this, has anything surprised you while you've been listening to the conference?
I think what was interesting was the first session by Dr. Michio Kaku. I think that was fantastic. I think that completely blew off my mind over there to really understand the world outside of quantum physics and to understand what's coming up for the future. And I don't think so. I think what we were talking about, the digital crypto, wholesale CDBCs, and the post-trade world payments, I think that's one part of it. That's just the beginning, I think. And there's a way many things to come up when I hear about those sessions. I think there was another interesting session which came up from Professor Vasantdhar from NYU. And I think the way which I looked at it, there was a very interesting equation which was put up in that segment, which says that when would be machine plus human will be greater than machine. And I think that's the aspect which we are all trying to look at it to really understand that what will be the ideal way of using machine and humans technology together to make it better than the decisions which will be made by machine.
If you are a registered delegate, of course, you can find those sessions, sibos.com. If you haven't registered, you've still got till the end of October to get on and to find those sessions, which kind of leads me naturally to my next question. As you were suggesting, there are certain things in those sessions that will tell us what we should be thinking about. I'm wondering what you think about when you expand this discussion into 2022. What should we be talking about next year?
The talent on the resourcing side, if the college graduate is coming out from the universities, I think they would like to understand that what technology they would like to work on. If they are being put up on a technology which is old and existing technology, whether they would have the patience to continue to work on those platforms and technologies, or their preference would be to learn on something which is disruptive, which is a new proof of concept project within the bank.
Vinod Jain, Senior Analyst at Aite-Novarica Group. Thank you so much for your thoughts. It's been wonderful having the contribution of all our experts today, not only briefly, very briefly, summarising their key takeaways from the conference, thinking about some of those aspects of what they've heard that surprised them, but then also setting the scene, some early thinking for what we might be talking about in 2022. So my thanks to all of our experts. And ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of a remarkable year at Sibos. I mean, it's remarkable because of the caliber of the speakers, the contributions, and also all of the incredible insights. It's been remarkable because of the production, the distribution to reach participants in nearly every country in the world. And it's been remarkable because it really has, I feel, this year challenged our thinking. It's really set the standards of debate and really challenged us all to think about what we as individuals and as an industry and as organizations, what is the role that we play? And these red threads have been really useful. They've guided us through discussion. We've thought about artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, quantum, but also never forgetting that human dimension that Vinod was just talking about. They've also guided us to think about the trends in digital assets, but the all-important conversation about trust and identity, and then also leading us to this ever increasingly important topic about sustainable finance as well. And all of these conversations have joined together to think about digital acceleration, transformative technologies, managing risk and banking on change, and lifting us truly up to examine and explore how the digital journey evolves, and altogether thinking about recharging digital finance. So here's just a small video to see us out, a small reminder, if you will, of Sibos 2021.
Sibos still has an unmatched ability to bring all of us together, more interactivity, new networking opportunities, and of course, all the phenomenal content that you expect from Sibos.
And so that brings us to the end of the What We Learned Sibos 2021 wrap show. What an amazing opportunity to reflect calmly on the week. I hope you, maybe as one of the 19,000 delegates who tuned in, I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope you enjoyed the conference as well. Or maybe you're watching this thinking, maybe I'll get involved next year. Maybe you're thinking, will we come together in Amsterdam 2022? And I sincerely hope so as well. Well, whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope that you too have enjoyed the conference, but also are truly thinking about the contribution that we all can make to the climate change imperative. It's enormous, it is global, it is local, and it's urgent. So thank you for tuning in. Stay safe. Stay well. I've been Julia Streets. Thank you for watching.